Hey guys, quick heads up before watching this video. You're actually watching part 2 of my 2-part series breaking down the 8th generation. So if you haven't yet watched part 1, then you should click the link in the description below so you can check that out before completing this video. Thanks and have fun. Alright, we're back. We're talking about the 8th generation of gaming, primarily consoles, a little bit on the PC side as well, of course. So if you happen to check out part 1, I spend a whole lot of time hooting and hollering about all the bad that's really come about with this 8th generation of console gaming. Like I said in that video, a lot of it kind of relating to the internet and some of what the internet brings and some of the bad practices that it really allows for the gaming industry and a lot of these developers to put in place. DLC, microtransactions, broken, incomplete games, stuff like that. It's a huge problem. That stuff is just way too prevalent for me. However, I don't want to make it sound like there isn't still a good side to everything happening right now. I think there's a lot of great things happening in gaming today during this 8th generation. We've got 3 really excellent consoles, the Wii U, Xbox One, and PlayStation 4. We have a booming, bustling PC market happening right now. And I think that everything has a different level of quality that it can bring to us. And there's different strengths across the board and all these different platforms and how we can game. And although there are a lot of those bad things happening that I spent 30 minutes yelling about before, there's a lot of great things. So I'm going to spend some time today, hopefully a little bit quicker, discussing all of these good things that I see. So when discussing the good, it's interesting because there was a main thread line with a lot of the stuff that I kind of was leaning on the bad side, which was the internet. On the side of good, it's a little bit different. The main thread line that I think is connecting most of the good things, not all of them, but most of them, is far, far simpler than the problems that we saw on the bad side. And it's the games. It's simply the games. There are so many good things happening in the world of just video games, actual games to play with this 8th generation, that it just gets me really, really excited and really happy. Things that I think maybe a lot of people never really thought to discuss or to look into. So I'm going to spend most of this time just talking about the gaming trends that we're seeing. There's a couple of other things, but it's really just a lot of the good things happening when it comes to just playing a freaking video game, putting it in your system, downloading it from a store, picking up a controller, and just going. You know, that's what's really, really strong, I think, currently. So on the gaming side, the number one thing that I think is pretty great about what's happening with this 8th generation is surprisingly new IPs. Now that may sound counterintuitive to what we know is happening because we know a big problem in the gaming space is, it's always just a remake or it's a sequel or it's just another spin-off in a series that always exists. Yes, absolutely true. That certainly does happen. But I'm telling you guys, there are a lot of really cool new IPs in just this short, this very young 8th generation that we're in, 2-3 years in so far. There's been a lot. Splatoon is a huge one that just launched last year for the Wii U. That game has been a massive breakout hit, still played today by millions of gamers. Every once in a while I pop it back in and it's like, oh my god, I forget how fun this is, and I get hooked again for another couple of weeks. Fantastic game, brand new game from Nintendo. I mean, they haven't made a new IP in a very long time, so even they're bringing it with this 8th generation. My favorite games so far, Bloodborne for the PlayStation 4. Yes, some may argue it's a spiritual successor to the Dark Souls stuff, and that is true, but it sure as hell is not a sequel. That is a brand new game, and I guarantee we will get a sequel to it, so it will probably be spawning a brand new series. I think it absolutely qualifies as a brand new IP. There's never been a Bloodborne game before. This was the first. The game is freaking fantastic. It's been very successful. It was nominated for Game of the Year. It's my favorite game for a reason. It's great, and it's another huge new IP. My second favorite game, The Wonderful 101, another awesome new IP from Platinum Games, known for a lot of sequels and other things, but that's a freaking wonderful game on the Wii U, Wonderful 101. Watch Dogs is a huge one. Zombie U, The Evil Within. Devil's Third is a new IP game that is obviously kind of a joke there because most people hate it. It got horrible reviews. And while there are so many problems with that game, you've seen my Let's Play of it, I'm actually really enjoying that game. So it's a bad game that I enjoy. I'm still considering it on the good side because it's a good new IP that I have a lot of fun with. Destiny is a new IP that I absolutely love to death. Quantum Break coming out very soon. The Order 1886 is an interesting one. I haven't played it. Obviously, it's another game like Devil's Third that most people really hate. Was very disappointing. Reviews were not strong. It was considered a big disappointment. Since I haven't played it, I can't really speak as to the true quality of it. But in the same breath that I can say I enjoy Devil's Third while I acknowledge it's a bad game that people don't like, I think that I should give the same respect to a game like The Order 1886, which I haven't played, so I don't know how bad it may or may not be. But I know that there are people out there who enjoy that game. It is a brand new IP that had a lot of press surrounding it, so I think that it counts for an exciting new IP that could spawn further sequels for the 8th generation. And then there's also Titanfall, was another really big one that we know, we know is spawning a sequel sometime soon. And, you know, coming from the Respawn guys, the guys who were responsible for some of the big changes in Call of Duty the last couple of years, I think Titanfall was a lot of fun. It was really cool. I'm excited to see where that series is going to go in the future. I mean, that's a list of 10 some odd games that are all brand new IPs that started this generation. You've heard me gush about Zombie U. I think that was the best use of the gamepad on the Wii U that we've seen yet. Freaking fantastic game. We know we probably won't get a sequel, even though they were working on one at some point, and that really, really sucks. But it's still a fantastic game. The Evil Within, I'm a huge survival horror guy. I think The Evil Within was a great game that, even though a lot of people talked very highly of, maybe didn't get as much press as it deserved. Quantum Break is going to be coming out in the next couple of months. I think that's going to be fantastic. The Division is a brand new IP also coming out in the next couple of months. As I discussed in my last video, not quite sure how excited I still am for the game, but it's going to be a pretty big deal. That game will be a big deal when it releases. And like, you know, the first four that I mentioned specifically, Splatoon, Bloodborne, Wonderful 101, and Watch Dogs, and we'll throw Destiny in there as well. Those are all big deals. Really, the Wonderful 101 isn't a huge game. It's just a personal favorite. But those other ones have been huge games. Very, very popular. Reviewed very well. They've made very big splashes in the gaming world. And that's a whole bunch of fantastic new IPs that have started with this 8th generation. So it turns out there may still be some new creativity to get out of the industry. So we can look at that one side of the coin and talk about all of the great new IPs that the 8th generation is bringing just in the first 3 years. I mean, I just listed 10 some odd games. It's only been 3 years into the generation. That's pretty cool that we have so many brand new IPs to be excited for. But you know what? I also think sequels are great. So on the other side of this coin, I'm going to talk about some of the sequels that I think are fantastic, because there ain't nothing wrong with sequels if games are really good and if people enjoy them. We always have new Mario games. So you got Super Mario 3D World on the Wii U. One of the very, very best reviewed games for the year. I think if you go to Metacritic and you look at every 8th generation game, that's like number 2 or 3, I think. And I even think that number 1 might even be a remastered. I think it's the Grand Theft Auto. So I think that right behind that, as far as brand new games this generation, Mario 3D World might be number 1. Maybe, maybe not, but it's way up there. That's a fantastic game. Bayonetta 2, Fallout 4, Xenoblade Chronicles X, The Witcher 3, Halo 5, a brand new Doom coming out this year, Smash Brothers for Wii U, Mario Kart 8, a new Star Fox coming out in a couple of months, new Forza Motorsports. I mean, the list could just go on and on. This is a good example of games that are traditional, tried and true sequels. Series that have been going on in some cases for decades. And you know what? People can complain about, oh, there's no creativity when all we have is sequels and spin-offs and franchises that already exist. And I see where that comes from, and there are certainly times where it's true. But I think it's also okay to celebrate really kick-ass sequels for series that everyone loves. I think Halo 5 was fan-freaking-tastic. I cannot tell you how good I think Halo 5 was. I even restarted the campaign again recently. It's so stupid good. Again, Mario 3D World, one of the best reviewed games. Bayonetta 2, masterpiece. It got a lot of perfect 10s from some sites that haven't given a perfect 10 for many, many years. I love Fallout. Fallout 4 is absolutely fantastic. I'm not a Forza Motorsports or a Gran Turismo guy, but those games are pretty big deals for fans of them, and those people absolutely love them. Love me some Star Fox, of course. The Nintendo fan of me is very excited for Star Fox. Smash Brothers was great. Mario Kart was great. Doom could be like the best freaking game this year, except for probably Zelda, which, by the way, we're getting another Zelda. So all of these sequels, you know what? There's nothing wrong with sequels, the way I see it, especially when you compare all these sequels with all of the brand new IPs I just laid out. I mean, that's 20 games right there between the two, again, in only 3 years. And obviously, on both sides of that coin, there's a lot of games I didn't even bring up. This was just a short, quick list I put together. So one of your favorite games might even be a sequel already this generation, and you know what? I think that's cool, man. Like, I'm happy to see a lot of series continuing. I mean, in the case of something like, well, I guess Mario is an obvious one. In the case of something like Halo or Doom Or frickin' Mario Kart. I mean, when you think back to when these series first started, who would have known the empire that series like that could create? Mario Kart is its own empire. Halo is its own empire. And here, 20, 25 years after these games had been created, they're still going. That's so freaking cool. Doom? Oh my god, like the first Doom was, what, 1993 or 92 maybe, even older? And, that was just a PC first-person shooter when no one even understood what first-person shooter was. And here we are, the fourth game is finally coming out, and it looks fantastic. So I personally am happy to see a lot of series that I love still continuing with this 8th generation. People can bitch and moan about the lack of creativity, but personally, I don't see it that way, especially when you look at all those brand new IPs. A personal favorite topic of mine is, of course, Star Wars. The fact that we just got a Star Wars Battlefront for the first time in 10 years is really fantastic. It may not be the Battlefront 3 we really deserved and should have had, but it is a new Battlefront. It's really, really excellent. It's celebrating the original trilogy and helped lead up into the hype of, Episode 7. I think that's great. We also live in the time of the hopeful promise of brand new Star Wars games. The reason this is important to me is not just because I love Star Wars and I'll find an excuse to talk about it on any video I possibly can, but also because, as you might have heard me say, I think we were really, really screwed with Star Wars games last generation. The 7th generation, I think, was a generation primed to have a couple of really fantastic kick-ass Star Wars games because the 6th generation ran the gamut. Rogue Squadron, Clone Wars, Episode 3, the Lego Star Wars. There were so many games that started and had great fun times with that 6th generation on the GameCube, PS2, and Xbox, but the 7th generation dropped the frickin' ball. We got a really crappy Clone Wars fighting game that no one cared about, and we got The Force Unleashed, and I think those two games were super lame, really disappointing, did not live up to the hype or the potential. And so for me, I feel like I've been waiting close to 10 years for really good Star Wars games to come back. And Battlefront is an amazing first step. Yes, the problem with the DLC exists, like I talked about in the last video, but I still love that game, you guys. I named it my 4th favorite game of the year for a reason. It's a fantastic game, great Star Wars game. EA's got 10 years of Star Wars games to come. There's rumors about Republic Commando 2 and other Star Wars games to start coming. I think that we might be primed for the promise of new Star Wars games, and that's something that the 8th generation is bringing that the 7th generation didn't. So for me, that's a really big deal. Here's another one I'm excited to talk about because I don't normally get excited about this, but it absolutely is worth talking about. The indie game market. Indie gaming is bigger now during this 8th generation than it ever was before when it was truly kind of introduced last generation. And I think that's exciting. I don't really get into indie games. There's very few that I play. Shovel Knight was really fantastic. Fast Racing Neo. There's probably another one. I don't know. I don't play indie games. It's just not my thing, man. But I get that it's a huge market and it's a great way for the gaming industry to find talent. And I think that that's really cool. So when you look at some of the indie games that are really big right now, Rocket League, Undertale's making a huge splash, Fast Racing Neo, like I just mentioned, Five Nights at Freddy's, Life is Strange, supposed to be wonderful, Her Story, nominated for Game of the Year. There's a lot going on with the indie game market that's making a lot of breakout hits, and I think that that's pretty cool. So the fact that the 8th generation is blowing the doors open on indie gaming is a really big deal, and even though I don't get into indie games, I think that it's a pretty wonderful thing happening right now. Something else pretty cool happening today is what I'm calling the old school game revival. There's a lot of games that are really emulating what used to be hip and happening freaking 20, 30 years ago. And people are into it. People are enjoying it. Even younger gamers who maybe never really growing up understanding why 16 or 18-bit side-scrolling games were awesome back in the day. And that's a really weird thing when you think about it, but it's like the greatest thing ever. Shovel Knight is like the prime example. It's the poster child for this trend. Even though it's a recent game and games had been kind of doing it beforehand, that really has helped usher in like the awareness of what's going on here. And I think that this is really cool. Axiom Verge is another game just that came out this year. One of my favorites of the year that very much is like a 16-bit Super Metroid kind of thing. Undertale, I just mentioned, really fantastic as far as the old school kind of like PC-based RPG kind of thing, or like with a little bit of the humor that Earthbound had. Rogue Legacy, Nidhogg, Hotline Miami, and a plethora of others. There's so much happening there where all of a sudden it's like 8-bit and 16-bit games are cool again. And they're making brand new ones. I mean, hell, even if you do go back to last generation, we had Mega Man 9 and 10, or was it 8 and 9? I think it was, no, it was 9 and 10, right? I don't know. I think it was 9 and 10, yeah. But the fact that that even started last generation was really cool, but that was like a one-off or a two-off. And then a couple of years later, here we are now, and it's like, boom, 8-bit is the shit all over again. And I think that that's a really neat thing that this generation is doing, and it's kind of helping show some of the younger gamers, hey, this is how gaming used to be. This is what we thought was cool when we were younger, and this is where the roots of what you're doing today came from. And I see it personally as a celebration of the history in the past and the roots of gaming. I see it as game developers saying, hey, like, you know, it would seem kind of silly to make a game in 8-bit in 2016 when graphics look as good as Star Wars Battlefront or Batman Arkham Knight, but we're going to do it because, god damn it, that's what we love. That's what we know. That's what we grew up. We want to make our own games that the 10-year-old versions of ourselves would have loved to play 20 or 30 years ago. And I just can't get enough of that stuff. It's definitely something happening in the indie game scene, which I said I'm not huge on. And they are 99% of the time downloadable only, which you know I'm not huge on. But that doesn't mean I'm going to take anything away from these games and what's happening in this trend that the 8th generation is really pushing forward. The old school game revival is a huge thing that I'm a big supporter of. And people don't really think about it enough, I don't think, but it's pretty badass. Some of the non-gaming related things that I think we can discuss real quick before wrapping this up is the online functionality and the online networks that exist today. Yes, I talked about how the internet makes some things terrible in today's gaming in the 8th generation, obviously, but it does do some great things. And even though the networks can get hacked, like I talked about last time, we still have amazing online gameplay abilities today that we never had. The fact that we have the Xbox Live Store and the Nintendo eShop and the PSN network and PlayStation Plus free games to download and the Xbox Arcade and all these different things, like, it's really cool that we have such a plethora of an online universe to find games to play and to play games with other people. Voice chat is incredibly common. I remember playing the first Gears of War on my roommate's 360 at the time, and I was blown away that his headset would let me just talk to other people as I played that game, and all of a sudden I was meeting other cool dudes to play video games with. And now it's common practice. Plus, you don't even want to meet random strangers nowadays because most of the time they're douchebags. But back then that wasn't the case. And I still just remember when it was really cool. And the fact that it's so common now is just so awesome. And I think that it's great that the internet in the 8th generation, allows for the online functionality and online gameplay of games to exist. We can have an MMO experience on a console. That's really cool. Final Fantasy XIV, Destiny. These things are now made possible because of what the 8th generation does. And I'm a pretty big fan of that. Also, building off of something that I talked about last time is fixing broken games. Yes, broken games are a problem because developers feel comfortable releasing broken games because they know that they can just get it out, have people buy the games, and then they can just patch it later with an update. And that's unfortunate because it creates a huge problem with broken games. But if you flip the coin and look at the other side of that, the fact that a game that releases broken can be fixed, can be fixed down the road is amazing. I mean, there were plenty of broken games on the NES, you guys. Just watch a bunch of the Angry Video Game Nerd videos to see how broken 8-bit NES games were. Imagine if developers had the ability to fix those remotely from their offices. And they could just tap into the servers, go right into your NES at home, and just boom, they can fix your crappy broken game. You know, that was like a pipe dream 20 years ago. And nowadays, we live in this day where broken games certainly do happen. Maybe to too much frequency, but they do happen. Yet still, we can solve those problems, and game developers have the ability to fix that. I think that's pretty sweet. The very last thing that I want to talk about is going back to DLC. Another thing I talked about last time as a bad thing, a bad practice happening in gaming. Arguably the worst practice in gaming happening right now. However, I have to still give some credit where credit is due and say that I think when DLC is done well, it's one of the coolest things that can happen in gaming. And it does happen with games nowadays. The 8th generation is pursuing what started in the 7th generation. We can take a game like The Evil Within or Bloodborne or Mario Kart that already releases fantastic. It already releases complete. People are extremely happy with it. It's worth our 50 or 60 bucks we pay to pick that game up day one, and we're content. And then they can say a couple of months or a year down the road, hey, here's a whole bunch of new stuff to play and a bunch of new stuff to do. You can put that game in now for the first time in a long time and experience new things. And that's what DLC is actually supposed to be. That, I think, is the actual benefit of DLC. When it first started, I think that was its intended design. The game industry and game developers today have bastardized it and turned it into this horrible mutated monster of what it was supposed to be and what it started as. But there are still cases this generation of some games and some game developers who are doing it right. And I think that's great, because when I love a game, I want to keep playing it. When I'm into a game like Bloodborne or Splatoon, I want to have more to play. I want to have more new things to do and to discover. And even though there's so many shitty things happening with DLC, like I said, I think it's great that we can still have a gaming landscape where we can get this stuff done right and done well and improve upon already complete fantastic games. So, long story not short at all, that's what's happening with the good side of the 8th generation. That's what's happening with 8th generation as a whole. Obviously, I talked about a lot of stuff here on both sides. I really worked to try to streamline this second part a little bit, because I talked about so many different things on the bad side, and I don't want the lopsidedness to make it seem like I think there are just worse things happening than there are good things happening today. I firmly believe in all these good things. The good side, I think what we've learned today and in this video, what I'm hoping to maybe kind of bring about within your own realm of thinking, is that we've learned the glue that's holding together the industry today, amongst all the bad shit, all the stupid DLC, all the broken networks, all the incomplete games, and all the microtransactions, is good games. I do still believe that at the heart of the gaming industry are good games, and I think that that still exists. Look at the indie games, look at the retro games, look at the new IPs, look at the kick-ass sequels. As a Star Wars fan, we have a whole new Star Wars gaming landscape to get excited about. I didn't know when we would see that again coming off of last generation, and all of these things make me really excited. I think that the 8th generation is going to have another 4 to 7 years or so in it. I don't know how the Nintendo NX is going to change that. I've talked about that in another video in the past, but I don't want to dwell on that. As far as what the 8th generation is, however long the Wii U lasts, and for however long the PS4 and Xbox One can go, I think with these next couple of years, the most important thing that's going to continue are new games. There are plenty of other new IPs I'm thinking of now just coming off of it. The Horizon Zero Dawn, No Man's Sky, all these other things that we know are on the way, The Last Guardian, brand new games that we can get excited about that we don't even really know enough about, but they're going to be filling in these next couple of years. We know we're always going to get more Halos and more Marios and more Zeldas. Like, that's never going to stop. Uncharted 4 is coming soon, things like that. It's going to continue. The things that keep us gaming really are the games when you look at it. And I think that if there's anything the 8th gen is still continuing to do well from previous generations, is great games. There are awesome developers out there. Nintendo, Naughty Dog, Atlas, Rockstar. There's plenty of guys out there doing great things. And even some of the worst companies like Ubisoft, Activision, and EA, they still do great things sporadically enough to make me happy. So I'm pretty satisfied overall with the 8th generation. The bad stuff is really bad. There's no doubt that that's the thing that we can also take away from this, is what's bad is horribly horrendous. And I really think that the gaming industry needs to take a long, good look in the mirror and find a way to change its practices and stop the inflated budgets and start being more honest to the gamer and to the consumer and making us feel more comfortable with their product. They got to figure that and sort that shit out soon. But I'm still okay dealing with a good portion of it if the good games keep coming. I believe they're going to keep coming. We don't quite yet know. Who knows how this could turn out? Maybe the good gets less good and the bad gets more bad. I guess that's also possible, but I'm just not going to see it that way until it happens. I'm going to remain positive and optimistic because that's just what I do. So that's pretty much it, man. That's my breakdown, A long series here, parts 1 and 2, discussing the good and bad of the 8th generation. Has it been a letdown? I think parts of it has been a letdown, but overall, I'm still enjoying gaming today, you guys. I come home every day, and I find a way to play some video games. And I'm always happy, and I'm always entertained, and I've always got something new to look forward to, man. And that's pretty darned cool. So I will thank you guys for tuning into this very long series here. I made sure to release these 2 parts at the same time, so it can kind of be this one conglomerate sort of thing that everyone can tune into. I really enjoyed doing this. It was just a super long conversation, as most of my videos usually are, but hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Obviously, share all your thoughts on both parts, the good and the bad, parts 1 and 2, on what you think the 8th generation means to you currently. Do you see it as a letdown? Do you see the good sides that I see? Is the bad too much for you to overcome? I mean, a lot to talk about, man, as always. So I really appreciate it. Thank you guys so much, as always, for tuning in for this very long 2-parter. This is Rob of Rule of 2 Review, and I'll catch you guys next time on hopefully a much shorter video.